Coming up, I'll reveal the base motives behind the Biden regime's reckless escalation of the war in Ukraine. I was about to tell you about the bogus charges against Trump's Attorney General nominee, Matt Gaetz, but I see Matt Gaetz is withdrawing his nomination, so I'll tell you the reason why. And the legendary singer and songwriter Lee Greenwood joins me. We're going to talk about his classic song, God Bless the USA, but also a new song that he wrote based upon some lyrics written by, of all people, Ronald Reagan and a guy named Mike Curb. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
For the first time in my lifetime, but also yours, U.S. long-range missiles have been fired into mainland Russia. Now, by long-range missiles, I do not mean ICBMs, which are intercontinental ballistic missiles. I don't mean nuclear missiles, but I mean missiles of a velocity and power that have not been used before in the Ukraine war, had been supplied by the United States to Ukraine, but are not being confined to the use to the battlefield, if you will, or the contested zones in which the fighting is taking place. Rather, it's like shoot these missiles into the heart of Russia. And Biden just gave Zelensky the permission to do it, and Zelensky goes, okay, I'll do it. And he did it. And this has put the war into a new phase. Now, I had the defense expert, Rebecca Koffler, talking about the details of all this, the sort of the what. And she pointed out that the United States, this is not a case where we hand over these missiles to the Ukrainians like, okay, guys, go ahead and fire. No, the United States has to point those missiles, guide them, track them, select targets, and participate in the firing of these missiles, which of course draws us more directly into this war, and provokes a immediate and somewhat scary reaction from Putin. Number one, Putin goes, now for the first time, Europe and the United States are more directly involved in the war. Number two, Putin also lowers the nuclear threshold. Now, this itself requires a bit of explanation. Basically, what's going on is if you have two nuclear powers, they're going to have a threshold at which point they're going to consider nuclear options. By and large, the power that is weaker is more likely to have a lower threshold because it's kind of like you're fighting against me. You're a lot stronger than me, and so if we just fight with our fists, you're likely to win. So I'm going to say, hey, listen. We both happen to have a gun in our holster, and we're kind of agreeing that we're not going to go for our guns in the fight, but I'm going to set a threshold where if I'm injured up to a certain point, essentially all bets are off. I'm now going to consider going for my gun because, after all, that is an area in which we are level. You may have more nuclear weapons than we do, but the truth of it is neither of us can really afford to go to the nuclear option because it's going to be kind of curtains or catastrophe or maybe even Armageddon for both sides. So Putin is rattling the nuclear saber. Now, more than that, on Russian television, they're actually talking about all the European cities that are in the target. I heard this Russian commentator, and he basically goes, "Yeah, we got Berlin, we've got, I forget, Prague, we've got." He talked about, and he goes, don't think that Great Britain is going to be safe. He goes, "We have Manchester, we have Leeds, we have London." And then he makes this rather chilling comment. He goes, 3 missiles on Great Britain, and that's going to be the end of British civilization. Wow, and also true. Also true. Now, Giorgia Meloni, the Italian prime minister, very interestingly, has said that she does not support Biden's decision. She's the first major European leader to pull away from Biden. And I think the reason is really simple. She doesn't want Rome and Venice and Florence to be on the Russian nuclear target list. And so she's like, I'm not part of this. And no one should be. Because let's look at we discussed with Rebecca the what, but we haven't discussed the why. And there is no why. There is no reason for this. You could say that Biden is trying to kind of bring the war to a successful conclusion for Ukraine. That's one possibility. But that is such a remote possibility that it can be safely dismissed out of hand. Number two, Biden is trying to bring Putin to the negotiating table. A, that's not happening. B, it's not likely to happen, in part because Putin knows that he doesn't have to deal with Biden. Biden's going to be out pretty soon, and Trump's going to be in. So Putin has no reason to want to make any kind of deal with Biden. He might have if he thought that Biden and Harris are going to stay in there, or Harris is going to pick up where Biden left off, then Putin might go, okay, well, I've got to deal with these guys, but he doesn't. So what is the reason for Biden's reckless action? I think the answer is a very creepy one, and that is there has never been a case in American history where a lame duck president has decided to increase the risk of nuclear war just to spite his successor. Think about that. This is why they're doing it, and I use the word they very advisedly. My point is I don't think it's Biden who's doing it alone. Biden is obviously going along with it, or he's part of it, but he's not it. And so it is hatred of a political enemy. It is the desire to disrupt the peaceful transition of power. I mean, they talk about a peaceful transition of power. Biden has a meeting with Trump. We're going to have a peaceful transition of power. But they're not. They're doing whatever they can to mess things up. And by the way, not exclusively in foreign policy. Debbie told me this morning, she's like, guess what they're doing? They're loosening the restrictions on the border. They're trying to pull in more illegals while they can before the transition of power happens. So this is a government that is, it's hard to say they're going rogue because they've been rogue for 4 years. This is the roguery that they do even under normal circumstances. But let's just say that they're upping the ante. And they're upping the ante in a very dangerous way. There's an article in the Daily Mail. This is the UK version. It's talking about the fact that the Russians are now mass producing these nuclear bunkers in which thousands of people can shelter themselves in the event of a nuclear strike on Russia. In other words, they're preparing themselves for radiation fallout from a nuclear strike. Now, you don't do this kind of thing. In fact, very rarely have you seen these kinds of reports since the end of the Cold War. And that tells you that we are moving maybe into a situation that is no less dangerous than it was in the early 1990s. This is when the Cold War was winding down. For anything large like that to wind down is a precarious situation. You just don't know if a rogue government will take over, if they'll get rid of Yeltsin and there'll be a coup in Russia. This all was, by the way, handled very well by George H.W. Bush, who, it's the one good thing he did, having taken over from Reagan. He oversaw very adroitly and effectively the winding down of the Soviet Empire. But let's remember, Putin is an old KGB guy. He's an old KGB operative. He regrets the collapse of the Soviet Empire. He looks at himself as the custodian of the great Russian civilization. He is, in that sense, very proud, very quick to injury. I think he sees this as a provocation, and he's right to see it as a provocation. It is a provocation, and the tragic thing is it's not even a provocation driven by any kind of military calculation. It's a provocation solely derived from domestic political motives. Biden is doing this to mess up the world for Trump. For those of us holding our breath for the past several months, we can finally exhale. Work can finally be done on the major issues the country is facing. And one of the most significant is the national debt. The fact is our nation is virtually broke. And this debt is a house of cards that cannot quickly be dismantled. And so the strategy for you, for me, remains the same. Diversify our savings. And that's why Debbie and I buy gold from Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, even out of the president's control. It's important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group, my gold company, will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news, it won't cost you a penny out of pocket. If you want to find out more or get started, what do you have to lose? Text Dinesh to 989898. You get a free information kit, no obligation, just information. And plus now, right through Black Friday, you get a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchase. Diversify your savings with Birch Gold. Text Dinesh to 989898. Claim your eligibility for free silver today. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. Forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your health care is their top priority. Empower yourself today. Take control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. I promised yesterday that I would talk about the allegations against Matt Gaetz. And I dived into those, got educated on what these bogus claims are, and they are largely bogus, and was all set to tell you about them until just a few minutes ago on my way to the podcast, I look at my X feed. Matt Gaetz is withdrawing. And at first I thought this must be some kind of a prank, or this might, but then I saw Matt Gaetz himself posting, I am withdrawing. I don't want my nomination to be a distraction. Now, so my whole presentation of what they were going to say about Gaetz is sort of obsolete. What's the point of me going into it? Matt Gaetz is withdrawing. And so I'm going to actually take this conversation into a somewhat different direction. And I'm going to do it in a way by looking at a little known passage in Machiavelli's The Prince. I want you to kind of bear with me, and I'll bring it right back to Matt Gaetz once you see what I'm talking about. So Machiavelli is now talking about Cesare Borgia, the Florentine prince. And he says that when Borgia occupied the middle area of Italy, it's called the Romagna, he said it was complete chaos. There were people plundering each other. There was a lot of disunity in the country. I'm quoting Machiavelli, was full of robbery, quarrels, and every kind of violence. And so writes Machiavelli, wishing to bring back peace and obedience to authority, he considered it necessary. Necessary is a very key word for Machiavelli. He considered it necessary to give it a good governor. In other words, I may not like what I'm about to do, but it is necessary. Thereupon he promoted one Ramiro di Orco, a swift and cruel man, to whom he gave full power. This man in a short time restored peace and unity with the greatest success. Now comes the interesting twist, which is that this Ramiro di Orco was kind of a savage. And his idea was to bring the harshest force and punishment on anybody who was out of line. And so the Duke, which is to say Cesare Borgia, realizes that there's a lot of fear and hatred of the people, even though they are immobilized by fear, even though they're not plundering and robbing anymore. They're blaming this cruel man for imposing this harsh regime on Middle Italy. And so the Duke knows about this. So what does he do? Here's Machiavelli. And because he knew that the past severity had caused some hatred against himself, So, to clear himself in the minds of the people and gain them entirely to himself, he desired to show that if any cruelty had been practiced, it had not originated with him, but in the natural sternness of the minister. Under some pretense, he took Ramiro and one morning caused him to be executed and left on the piazza at Cesena with the block and a bloody knife at his side. The barbarity of the spectacle caused the people to be at once satisfied and dismayed. What are we getting at here? What we're getting at is a certain idea of delegation, in which what Cesare Borgia does, even though he is the one who wanted to shut down the anarchy, stop the violence, and even though this guy, Ramiro de Orco, was acting on his behalf, in the end he makes Ramiro de Orco take the blame. He makes Ramiro de Orco the scapegoat. He actually says, all of you now hate me, but don't hate me. Hate this guy. Put all your hatred on this guy. Here he is, dead in the middle of the town square. And so all of you can feel a sense of satisfaction that this cruel man has been brought to heel. And then what is your next emotion? Well, a sense of gratitude and wonder aimed at Cesare Borgia, who's the ruler over a large area of Italy, and you go, oh wow, well, we're not going to blame Cesare Borgia. It was just as horrible, Ramiro de Orco. So what Machiavelli is doing is giving you a kind of lesson in politics, in the roughness of politics and maybe the brutality of politics. And I'm thinking about this, and Debbie's going to say, well, this is a very Dinesh way to think about Matt Gaetz and what's happening to Matt Gaetz. But of course, you can kind of see what I'm getting at. And that is that what Trump has sort of done, and maybe not even intentionally, is he's drawn all this fire to Matt Gaetz. And look, why is Matt Gaetz withdrawing? I can only think of one reason, and that is Matt Gaetz. We have let's look at the calculus. We've got 53 to 47 in the Senate. Matt Gaetz knows every one of those Democrats, 47, are going to vote against him. He cannot afford to have more than 3 defections. If the Republicans all hold together, Matt Gaetz is in. And so I interpret Matt Gaetz' withdrawal as being a simple acknowledgement that there are more than 3 Republicans who have told Matt Gaetz straight out, there is no way I'm voting for you. Matt Gaetz, we got to admit, has been a controversial figure. His battle with Kevin McCarthy in the House was successful, but at the same time, it caused a lot of Republicans, and by the way, not just rhinos, not just moderates, even conservative Republicans who saw themselves as team players. Their view was, listen, McCarthy may not be the best, but nevertheless, McCarthy is the one who got the most votes. This is our system. We've got to deal with McCarthy. He's good at certain things. And so these people had a strong, hatred is not too strong a word, against Matt Gaetz. And probably they've got allies in the Senate. And so I think Matt Gaetz has recognized, I don't have the numbers. And so what's the point of me sticking in there? It's, if I'm going to get out, and this is Matt Gaetz, by the way, doing a Ramiro de Orco on his own, is it's better for me to kind of play dead in the public square now, because we're still in November. There's plenty of time for Trump to swap out Matt Gaetz. Here comes, Ken Paxton. There are other qualified candidates as well. We like Ken Paxton. He's a friend of ours. And of course, we've seen the good work that he's done in Texas. But Trump, I think, is able to rebound from this very easily, because it would have been much more embarrassing for Trump if Gaetz had gone up there, if there was a vote on Gaetz and Gaetz had lost, and then Trump goes, I'm going to appoint him anyway as a recess appointment. In a sense, I think Gaetz has seen the writing on the wall. At least this is why I cannot think of any other reason why Gaetz would say, I'm out, other than the fact that a minimum of 4 senators have just told him, it's not going to be you, Matt. We're not voting for you no matter what, even though we want Trump to get his nominees through, even though we're going to vote for all the rest of them, we're not voting for you. I might be wrong about that, but I don't think so. And I think in this way, Trump, who in my Machiavellian scheme of things is Cesare Borgia here, and That may not be an analogy that Trump particularly wants, and I don't mean the analogy that somehow they're the same type of person, none of that. But what I do mean is that Matt Gaetz in this case is a certain type of scapegoat, and Trump is going to have to move on without him. The story of MyPillow is a testament to faith and transformation. Mike Lindell, once battling addiction, found a new path when he embraced faith and began following Jesus. In gratitude, Mike is excited to share an exclusive offer with our listeners and viewers. Right now, the standard MyPillow is available for just $14.88. That's a savings that's too good to pass up. There's a limit of 10 per customer. Don't wait to take advantage of this amazing deal now with promo code Dinesh. Mike believes God gave him the idea for MyPillow in a dream, and it's designed with your comfort in mind. The pillow holds its shape. It adapts perfectly to your unique sleep position. It helps keep your neck aligned for the best night's sleep. And there's more. There are good deals all around. Take home a 4-piece kitchen set for just $25. Enjoy the new mattress topper starting at just $99.99, or pick up the luxurious MyPillow bed sheets starting at $49.98. The number to call, 800-876-0227. Again, it's 800-876-0227. Or go to MyPillow.com. When you use promo code Dinesh, you get huge discounts, so don't miss out. Order today. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast a new guest, and he is really a singing and songwriting legend, Lee Greenwood. You probably know him best from his song, God Bless the USA, which has become really a kind of Republican Party anthem, but certainly a massively recognized and powerful song in the country. Lee Greenwood has a website, leegreenwood.com. You can follow him on X at the Lee Greenwood. This is a guy with just too many songs on the charts to count. 7 number 1 songs, male vocalist of the year in multiple years. By the way, the Country Music Association named God Bless the USA its Song of the Year in 1985. And the song we also want to talk about is called Start the World Over. It's his latest song. It's featured in the film Ronald Reagan. Lee, welcome. Great to have you. I think I was introduced to your music with the God Bless the USA song. And my wife, Debbie, reminds me, did that song kind of make its political debut? Was it at the 1984 Republican Convention? When did that song become identified with Republicans and with Reagan?
Yeah, I think you're right on the target, Dinesh. I wrote the song in 1983, and of course it was Universal Records that owned MCA, and I was signed to the MCA label in Nashville that made the call to release the song as a single. If they had not done that, I don't think anybody would ever have heard it. It was on the 4th album that I had at MCA called You've Got a Good Love Coming, which would turn out to be also a hit for us. That our first album was Inside Out. The second, Somebody's Gonna Love You, which produced IOU, was a Grammy winner. Wind Beneath My Wings, I was the first one to sing that, and so forth and so on. But as we move towards God Bless the USA being used at the 1984 RNC, it was a request by then President Reagan. And I had a congressional appearance at the White House for the Reagan family and his vice president, the Bush family. And of course, 41 then became my very close friend in years that would follow. So God Bless the USA, that was its first entrance into the conservative circle, if you will. It would continue to be on the campaign of the vice president that ran for president and then was elected, at least for one term. And then there was a brief period before his son, W, ran for president. And then again, I would sing for his campaign. And then, of course, there was another brief period before Donald Trump started using it for his 2016 elected presidency. And then after he got out of the White House in 2020, because he only ran for one term. And now, once again, here we have Donald Trump, once again elected president of the United States. And you see my performances with God Bless USA with him again.
I mean, it's so incredible that we talk about making America great again. And part of what that means, I think, is going back to the optimism and prosperity and strength that America demonstrated in the Reagan era. And your song is really the thread that seems to connect all of this together. But let's go back to the song itself. You said you wrote it in 1983, I think you said. And my question was, if I remember, and I was an exchange student. I came to the country in 1978. I was in college in the early Reagan years. I remember that the country went into a deep recession in 82, and it came out of the recession in 1983. Was it that optimistic mood of 1983 that convinced you to write the song? If you had to think back, what gave you the idea?
No, it wasn't that at all. As my career developed from a sharecropper grandson in Sacramento, California, leaving home at 17 and going to the state of Nevada to start my career. I opened at the Stardust Hotel with my own band in 1960 and performed for almost 20 years in the state of Nevada, pursuing my career, writing music for major shows, lounge acts, first of all, then in the main rooms later on. I even dealt cards in the casinos. So I have an interesting past where I'm not mixed with any particular tribe or culture. And so coming to Nashville, Tennessee as a country artist was a little bit different for me. My background being era of the Beatles and Elvis Presley. I'm a rocker. My background is rhythm and blues and jazz, rock, country. It's all in one. And the development of God Bless the USA as a patriotic song, and it was only because I wanted to write something that was a tribute to my country. And in the 1980s, the early 1980s, I was touring 300 days a year. I went immediately to chase my career and find country fans every doghouse, outhouse, and roundhouse in America. And I did find the fans. We had millions of records sold before I wrote God Bless the USA. Then I had a platform to deliver it. And that was the only reason I believe that it came about, and coincidentally, with an upturn in America's economy in 1983. So it really wasn't anything to do with that, but I was blessed to have it. And it spanned the next 2 years for Song of the Year in 1985 at the CMA. And then, of course, later on, the Gulf War. And then later on, the attack on America. And more Americans became familiar with my song. But the military, they knew immediately what it was. And it was a tribute to them. And I did 16 USO tours all over the world, embracing the fact that Americanism is the strongest thing in the whole world for protection of freedom.
How would you compare the song? Because the song is the same, but the country is different, right? We're a long way from the Reagan era. We've been through a lot in between, including 9/11, the Obama era, of course, all the controversy around Trump. And yet the song has this enduring penetration and ability to speak to people. If you think across this horizon of some 40 years now, what are your thoughts about the song in relationship to Reagan and the song now in relationship to Trump? Do you see Reagan and Trump as kind of the same type of guy, or do you see them as very different?
Well, there's several questions there. And yes, I do see some similarities. The greatest similarity for me is they're both patriots. They're both patriots of America. They believe in the greatness of America. Reagan did. But the difference with President Trump doesn't want to start wars. He wants to stop wars. And he will do that if he can just get enough support from everybody around him. Now, as far as the thread of God Bless USA transcending 40 years, I wrote it purposely not to be a period song. I wanted to make sure that it spoke to all generations. And you can't imagine how many people send me a video of their 4 or 5 or 6-year-old singing "Proud to be an American" and waving a little flag. It makes me so proud to know that it's gone now for 4 different decades of generation after generation who understands what it means when I say, if tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life. This is not a period phrase. This is about the entire existence of America as a republic, as a free republic. And then proud to be an American. When I wrote that song, I hadn't heard anybody in years saying they were proud to be American. They're proud Italian American. They're proud British American. They're proud Ethiopian American. A lot of people who came here to be citizens put their country first. And I'm like, No, I don't think so. We're Americans first. So I said, I'm going to say I'm proud to be who I am. I'm a natural born citizen in America, but I embrace the country no greater than a citizen who had come here and learns after 7 years what our history is and wants still to become a citizen of this country. And last but not least, if you'll know, I put the word God in front of my song. A lot of people call it Proud to be an American. It is God bless the USA. And I put, because of my faith, I put God first.
You know, I think you mentioned one of the things that makes a song so powerful, it's timelessness. But I think another element that makes it really powerful is it is in the first person. In other words, you're not speaking in abstractions about, I love the Constitution, I love the Bill of Rights. You're like, hey, if I ever lost everything and if I had to ever start again. And I think part of the beauty of that, Lee, is that it taps beautifully into American exceptionalism. Because like I grew up in India, my wife Debbie, who's right here, she grew up in Venezuela. We actually couldn't say that because the truth of it is in a lot of other countries, if you lose everything, you cannot get up off the ground. And I think part of what you were saying is that in America is a country where if you get knocked flat on your back, and nevertheless, because it is a free country, because it offers opportunity and upward mobility, this is the one place where you actually can get up. So that the song is clarifying that unique feature of America. Would you agree?
Well, thank you for pointing that out. That's exactly why I wrote those lyrics. And Dinesh, you know, I've been down. I was in Los Angeles struggling during my years in Vegas. I spent 3 years in LA, San Diego. I worked in Montana and some of the places were not so glamorous, and starved, and down to the point where I had my last couple dollars. And I'm like, you know what? Now I know how a guy feels who has to go and rob a 7-Eleven who can't feed his family. I get it. You know, so, but if you have your talent, you're gifted, Dinesh. And I've been granted a gift of singing. And here's another thing. I am 82 years old. I can still sing this, and I will sing it probably another few years. I don't know how long, but as long as my chops hold up, I will continue to sing it. So that does keep the song alive. A lot of singers or writers who have written something that may be long lasting, they don't sing it anymore. So it tends to go to the wayside. I am still the artist. I am still the Grammy winner artist, and I can sing it.
Lee, let's talk about the new song, Start the World Over. This is a song with a remarkable backstory to it, a backstory that goes back to Reagan. It goes back to a friend of Reagan, a guy named Mike Curb. Talk a little bit about the story behind this song, which you sing and is featured in the film Reagan.
Well, it's not, it was not in the film, unfortunately, but the record producer, Mark Joseph, I've known for quite a few years, and our relationship only goes through the recording industry, but he called me about 2 years ago and said, I've got this thing. He said, it's not really a finished song, but Ronald Reagan and Mike Curb were friends. Now, Mike Curb supported his candidacy for president. Okay, so you know they had a solid association. They're sitting around one day having a sandwich and some coffee, and they tried to write this song. When he sent the lyrics to me, they were very chopped up. It really didn't have any consistency. I said, let me tell you, I will write the song, but I'll keep only 2 phrases from it. The title, let's start the world over again, because that's a wonderful thought. I know Reagan had that thought. And the second line was the beacon of freedom, which I left in the chorus, because I think that's what a lot of people still refer to America as. When they see Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor, there's the beacon that stands for freedom for around the world. And we've given up a lot to keep that statue there. And so I rewrote the whole song, and I did the master. It's going to be released on an aftermarket album, which features many other artists singing songs of the time. But mine's the original. Mine's the only original that I completely rewrote the song. And I sing it.
There's an article I'm looking at in the Tennessean which talks about how Mike Curb and Reagan are in the limousine together, and they're confident that they're going to win the 1980 election, that Reagan is. And so I guess they're talking about the fact that the country is going to have a new beginning, and so start the world over again. I think if I'm also correct, there is a line from the philosopher Tom Paine who says, I'm now quoting, "We have it in our power to start the world all over again." Now, Tom Paine is referring to the Enlightenment. He's referring to the American Revolution, a new beginning. So I think it's actually quite remarkable that this phrase plants itself in the head of Mike Kerb and Reagan. You then see the power of it and pick it up for your song. So you said the song is going to be released. When is it coming out, and how can people find out more about you, about the song, and about your work?
Well, certainly you can find more about my release of my God Bless USA Bible, and for the album that's been released called American Patriot, all on my website, leegreenwood.com. I don't believe they have a release date yet because the album has several other artists have submitted their recordings yet, which I can't name. I think Genesis is one. I think Guns N' Roses. I think Travis Tritt. I'm not sure who all the artists are on the album. But once they get that coalition put together, it'll be released upon their own cognizance. But go to leegreenwood.com. And if you, again, I want to mention the Bible for just a second. The GodBlessUSABible.com is where you'll find my version of the Bible, which is the King James Version. And in the back of the Bible has the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd like to have that pairing of God's Word, and because this is United Bible Week, by the way, National Bible Week, then go to my website and find that, GodBlessUSABible.com or leegreenwood.com, and pick up one of these. That's well priced, beautiful to hold, and it contains the documents of our founding fathers.
Not to mention, it contains maybe one of the most elegant translations of the Bible ever done. You said the King James Version, which is actually my favorite version. Guys, I've been talking to the legendary singer and songwriter Lee Greenwood. Follow him on X at the Lee Greenwood. Lee, thank you very much for joining me.
And you're welcome. Happy Thanksgiving.
And to you too. I am discussing in the context of my book, The Big Lie, the issue of left and right and what those things mean in America. And yesterday I mentioned that the right is, in a sense, the party of conserving the principles of the American Revolution and conserving freedoms, political freedom, economic freedom, and then freedom of speech and assembly and religion. But there is a further element that needs to be mentioned. The right in America is not merely the party of liberty. It is also the party of virtue. And virtue here stands for the notion of a transcendent moral order. A transcendent moral order means that there's right and wrong, and this right and wrong is not purely subjective. Something isn't right because you say it's right or because I think it's right. Something isn't wrong because of your individual preference or even group preference. Right and wrong have a kind of objective status. They are right or wrong in nature. And nature here refers to the created order. And transcendent, the term here just means something that transcends us. It is something that is built into the structure of things. So this moral order is not, in fact, specified in the Constitution, but it underlies the American founding. When you see it right there in the Declaration of Independence, we're created equal with unalienable rights that come from a creator, including the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Now, all of this precedes the Constitution, right? The Declaration 1776, the Constitution 1789. So even before there's a Constitution, there is an affirmation of this transcendent moral order. So this is in a very summary form, this is what the right stands for. But let's turn to the left. What does the left stand for? Well, basically, the left is defined by its hostility to the restrictions placed by the American founders on the government. The founding was a set of restrictions or chains on the government. Remember I said I defined the Bill of Rights as Congress shall make no law. Congress shall make no law to do this or make no law to do that. So these are restraints on government. And this is really why the left doesn't like the Constitution. They don't like the written Constitution. They don't like the Constitution for what it says. They're always talking about a living Constitution, by which they mean a Constitution that they get to interpret in such a way that the original statements and principles can be left behind. And moreover, today's left calls itself progressive. And progressive is a very interesting term because inherent in it is an idea of progress. But progress in what way? In what direction? If I say, well, I'm heading over here, and someone goes, where are you going? Well, I'm making progress. Well, yeah, but you're making progress toward what? Where is it your intention to go? Oh, I'm going to Chicago. Well, all right, then you're going in the right direction. So progressive here is used as a term that means progress away from the American founding and progress toward the establishment of an increasingly powerful centralized state. So if the founding represented restrictions on the government, restrictions on the state, progressivism refers to removing those restrictions, diminishing them, and strengthening the power of government. This is, by the way, why the progressives call us reactionaries. They say we are regressive. We want to go back. They don't like the idea of make America great again because to them, making America great again means taking America back. Back where? Back to the founding and the principles of the founding. So another way to put it is that from the founders' point of view, the government is the enemy of rights. We see this, as I mentioned a moment ago, in the restrictions placed on the government. The way you secure your rights is by limiting the power of the government. So while conservatives see government as the enemy of rights, progressives see government as the friend and the securer of rights. And so for the left, rights come from the government, and the government gives them to you. The government, of course, reserves the power to take them away from you. And the rights in question here become increasingly odd. They in fact, are somewhat detached from the rights specified in the Bill of Rights. When you talk to someone on the left and find out what's the most important right to you, it's like, I want the right to an abortion, or I want the right to have equal treatment in all respects for gays and transsexuals. And so these kinds of more novel, exotic, bizarre rights take the place of the right to free speech and the right to assembly and the right to due process and so on. And then concomitant with that, or along with that, the left rejects the idea of a transcendent moral order. You can see this very clearly in the rejection of the right to life itself. Because if life is sacred, and what is the content of a womb if not human life? It can't be any other kind of life. Then you would at the very least have some respect. No one is saying, life is taken under certain conditions, right? We have wars, we have the death penalty, we have accidents, we have emergencies, we have self-defense. So there are cases where life itself is threatened, but even in those cases, the general approach is always to protect life, respect it, and give stronger protections to innocent life. And so, for example, if someone is killed wantonly, that is a grave crime. If someone is killed in self-defense, that is not as grave a crime because you yourself were under threat. And so the person threatening you is not innocent, at least from the point of view of your security. So this is the broad line of distinction between the right and the left. And I thought that this is an important preface before we go into the questions of fascism and Nazism. Are they on the right? Are they on the left? Let's first ground ourselves in a fairly solid understanding of what is the right and what is the left. So let's now move on to the next section, which is an examination. I call it Introducing the Lie. And I give an example. You can find big lies from babbling pundits on social media. It would be no problem for me to pull examples from like Bill Maher or Chris Hedges or some of the guys that you see on TV or pontificating in various formats. I think that the way to examine this topic is to look at somebody who's seen as a scholar. And I want to pick, for my case study, the historian Robert Paxton. He's actually somebody I interviewed for Death of a Nation. He's in that film. Paxton is a professor of history at Columbia. He's considered an expert on fascism. He is an expert on fascism. He knows a lot about fascism. But it's very interesting when you look at his media statements. And I'm looking here at his statements in, by and large, popular media. Interviews on NPR, for example, an interview he gave with Slate magazine. I noticed that he doesn't tell you the full truth about fascism. And the striking thing about it is he knows better. He actually reads the original documents. It's pretty clear from his book. He knows what fascism is, but he doesn't let on. In other words, what I'm going to suggest is that he participates in the big lie himself. Why? Because he's catering to the left. He's on the left, and he's providing a message that is harmonious with what the left wants to say. And so even though there are elements of fascism that clearly echo the left, Paxton will never mention those. And even though there are elements of fascism that are very different from the right, Paxton will never mention those. What he does is he tries to find some area of overlap between fascism and the right, however vague. Things like, Hitler spoke for an hour and a half at his rallies. I noticed that Trump speaks for about an hour and a half at his rallies. As if to say that speaking for an hour and a half at a rally is like one of the signature elements of fascism. This may seem at a certain level profoundly debased and stupid, and it is. But when it comes out of the mouth of somebody who is a genuine authority, you got to realize that there is a certain cunning intellectual manipulation going on. So what I said at the origins of this book is that we're discussing a big lie, and the big lie is an attempt to redefine, to reinterpret, to twist, to manipulate. And I want to show you, and I'll pick this up, I guess, on Monday, how Paxton actually does that, and how he does it really by identifying features of fascism and the right that are merely incidental. They're incidental to fascism and they're incidental to the right. But he compares them as though to say, aha, look, these are two very similar ideologies. He's not going to go as far as to say that like Trump's a fascist, but he wants to kind of cajole his own progressive leftists in that direction. He wants to make it seem respectable for them to believe that. And so he, in his own way, knowing better as he does, participates in the big lie.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.